Today, let's take a look back at the story of two actors who, driven by their strong desire for higher pay, ended up losing their roles in one of the most expensive franchises in Hollywood history. The actors in question are Terrence Howard and Edward Norton, both of whom overestimated their star power and ultimately ended up with nothing, a decision they likely regret to this day. Terrence Howard's film career had a rough start. Throughout the 1990s, he had to settle for minor roles in obscure films, often working for next to nothing. But in the early 2000s, Howard's luck finally changed. His big break came with Hustle and Flow, a film about a pimp aspiring to be a rapper. It resonated with American audiences, and the Academy even awarded it an Oscar for Best Original Song. Howard himself received an Oscar nomination for Best Actor for his role in the film. From that moment on, Howard's career took off. While he earned just $12,000 for Hustle and Flow, a year later he was making $1 million for a supporting role in The Brave One. Studios began casting him in major films like August Rush and The Hunting Party, and his paychecks kept growing. That's when Marvel Studios executives took notice. At the time, Marvel was just beginning to build its cinematic universe, and since few major stars were interested in signing on, the studio had to rely on lesser-known actors. Howard, a rising star, seemed like a solid investment. What many people don't realize is that Terrence Howard was initially the highest-paid actor in Iron Man. He earned $3.5 million, more than anyone else in the film. For comparison, Robert Downey Jr., who played Tony Stark, was paid only $500,000, while Jeff Bridges made $1 million and Gwyneth Paltrow $1.5 million. Howard's paycheck was bigger than the combined salaries of all three of them. Howard was supposed to become War Machine and even get his own spin-off film, which is why he initially agreed to a supporting role in Iron Man. But things didn't go as planned. The film became a massive box office hit, and Robert Downey Jr. emerged as the real star. For Iron Man 2, Downey demanded a $10 million paycheck. Howard, now seeing himself as a major star, asked for a raise from $3.5 million to $5 million. Realizing that Howard wasn't a significant box office draw, Marvel refused and instead offered him the same $3.5 million. When Howard pushed back, the studio started looking for a replacement. It didn't take long to find one. Marvel ultimately went with Don Cheadle, an established but not overly expensive actor, who agreed to play War Machine in Iron Man 2 for just $1 million. Howard, shocked by the turn of events, tried to negotiate, but the studio rejected his offers and unceremoniously showed him the door. In later years, Howard frequently brought up the situation, often making unflattering remarks about Don Cheadle. Perhaps his attitude played a role in the decline of his acting career. The one thing that saved it was his role in the TV series Empire, which became a huge hit. It's hard not to feel a little sorry for Howard. He had great chemistry with Robert Downey Jr., something Cheadle never quite replicated. But at the end of the day, it's important to have a realistic understanding of your worth. Unlike Howard, who lost his role purely because of salary demands, Edward Norton's replacement by Mark Ruffalo was a more complicated situation. The Incredible Hulk, which hit theaters in 2008, was the second film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, following Iron Man. The $150 million film underperformed at the box office, grossing only $264 million worldwide. However, Marvel had anticipated that the early films in the franchise wouldn't be huge hits, so a sequel was still on the table. The real problem wasn't just the film's financial underperformance, but the conflicts between Norton and the studio. Had circumstances been different, things might have played out another way. Back in 2008, Marvel was still working with different Hollywood studios to distribute its films. But in August 2009, Disney acquired Marvel, changing everything. While Paramount Pictures agreed to return the distribution rights to Iron Man, Universal Pictures, which held the rights to the Hulk films, refused to do the same. Initially, Marvel had plans for 2 Hulk films, something both Edward Norton and Marvel Studios president Kevin Feige confirmed at the time. The second film was meant to be much darker. Norton himself described it as being similar in tone to Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight. If Disney had owned the Hulk rights, they might have moved forward with the sequel. But since Universal still controlled distribution, Disney had no interest in producing a movie whose profits would go to a rival studio. As a result, Norton's vision for a darker Hulk film was scrapped. Edward Norton was offered a role in the Avengers, though his character would have had significantly less screen time. Unhappy with this, he pushed hard to secure a bigger role. It's important to remember that at the time, the Marvel Cinematic Universe was nowhere near the juggernaut it became after the Avengers was released. Captain America made $370 million on a $140 million budget. While technically profitable, it didn't fully recoup its marketing costs. Thor performed slightly better, grossing $450 million on a $150 million budget, enough to cover its expenses and make a modest profit. But it still wasn't a massive financial success. The only true financial hit Marvel had at that point was the first Iron Man. Its sequel, Iron Man 2, was also profitable, earning $620 million on a $200 million budget. However, given that the first film cost $140 million and grossed $585 million, the studio likely expected a bigger profit jump than just $30 million from the increased investment. So when Edward Norton was making his demands, the Marvel Universe was still in its infancy, and even he didn't take it seriously. That's why some actors at the time felt emboldened to ask for more. In 2010, when Marvel and Norton officially parted ways, the studio cited creative differences, a classic Hollywood excuse. While these situations sometimes genuinely involve artistic disputes, for example, Peter Jackson fired Ryan Gosling just a week before filming The Lovely Bones because Gosling ignored Jackson's vision and gained weight for the role. In most cases, creative differences means something else entirely. That was certainly the case with Norton's departure from Marvel. The real issue wasn't just creative disagreements. A few years later, rumors surfaced that Norton had demanded too much money for his role in the Avengers. At the time, he had the clout to make such demands, as he was more of a mainstream star than he is now. These days, he's firmly established in the indie film scene, occasionally taking on supporting roles in bigger productions like Collateral Beauty. If Norton had known how much the Avengers would eventually make, he likely would have lowered his salary demands. After all, the film's massive success and his increased exposure could have improved the chances of Marvel buying back the Hulk distribution rights from Universal. But in 2012, no one could have predicted that a superhero crossover would go on to gross an unprecedented $1.5 billion at the box office, especially when the highest-grossing solo film at that point had only made $620 million. While Terrence Howard's financial demands for Iron Man 2 are well documented, Norton's situation is less clear. According to rumors, he wanted $10 million. In 2019, Norton admitted that salary was one of the reasons for his split with Marvel, though he never disclosed the exact figure. For comparison, Mark Ruffalo agreed to play the Hulk for just $1.5 million. Ultimately, these disputes over money and screen time happened when no one believed Marvel would become the highest-grossing franchise in history. Nowadays, every actor wants to be part of the MCU, except for Joaquin Phoenix. Rumor has it that he turned down Doctor Strange because Marvel wouldn't give him enough creative control over the character. By contrast, Joker offered him complete artistic freedom. Looking back, both Howard and Norton might have agreed to lower salaries in exchange for long-term success, just as today's Marvel stars do. For example, Mark Ruffalo earned $3 million for Thor Ragnarok and $4 million for Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. Thanks for watching and stay tuned.